It's May 3rd, 2017, and here we are at Miles Square Regional Park in the city of Fountain Valley. In 1974, President Nixon's Urban Park Legacy Program gave birth to Miles Square with the gift of 469.22 acres of the old 640-acre HALF, or Emergency Helicopter Landing Field in Fountain Valley. I can't help but think that Nixon did this as a favor to Orange County, since his youth was spent living in Yorba Linda, where he was best friends with Johnny Apolitegui, who worked for my dad at Douglas Aircraft Company. The Harbors, Beaches, and Parks District, under the leadership of Larry Lehman, rose to the occasion and immediately embarked on developing the park with an abundance of baseball and other sports fields, lakes, roving archery, fixed archery, and even a golf course. All the buildings and landscaping, everything got underway right when I joined Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, now Orange County Parks, in January of 1975. It was a very exciting time, bringing to fruition the largest phase of urban regional parks growth in Orange County history, of which Miles Square was literally the centerpiece because of its location smack dab in the middle of Orange County. We acquired that 469 acres for the modest sum of $1. But all the while, the federal government retained a 137.26 acre triangular-shaped parcel in the middle of the park for emergency military helicopter landings, where other popular but temporary recreational uses such as model airplane flying and land sailing took place. These enthusiastic groups and many others were worried about the fate of the Center Triangle, since the Los Alamitos Naval Air Station, the Tustin Lighter Than Air Station, and El Toro Marine Corps Air Station were still fully operational, and there was a terrible shortage of affordable military housing. The Department of Defense came up with the conceptual plans to build a lot of multi-story apartment buildings smack dab in the middle of the park. But the physical access through the surrounding park was problematic, and on top of that, a chorus of well-organized active sports groups and surrounding neighborhoods pressured the city of Fountain Valley and the Board of Supervisors to oppose the military housing proposal. The President George Herbert Walker Bush administration got the message and began to negotiate to sell the Center Triangle to Harbors, Beaches, and Parks. That came to fruition in 1991 and 1992 when we bought the 137 acres. But unlike the Nixon administration, which only charged us $1 for 469 acres, President Bush charged us almost $40 million for the 137 acre inholding. We were a bit grumpy about that, and it was the largest single expenditure in the history of the OC Park system, far outstripping, for example, the state of California's purchase of Crystal Cove State Park for only $26 million. Ultimately, the Center Triangle was developed into another golf course to serve the residents of Orange County. There are several lakes in the park, and they became an attractive nuisance to coots, and there was a very significant coot population that established the park once the lakes were built. With the passage of time, it got worse and worse, and there were a lot of the public complaining about the coot soiling the lakes, water, and so forth. After several years of ruminating about it, various generations of park rangers decided it was time to take action. And so what happened was, one night, a cadre of park rangers came into the park at midnight and started shooting the coots. And the animal rights groups got involved, and it became a big brouhaha. But nevertheless, the coots really couldn't be gotten rid of at the time. Numbers were reduced, but they were always here. But we can see today, in 2017, no coots, but plenty of geese, which is also an environmental problem for lake water quality, not only here at Miles Square, but particularly at Laguna Niguel Regional Park, where some of the geese are almost the size of Volkswagen Beetles. There are many, many tot lots in the park, and as you can see by the looks of this one in 2017, it almost looks brand new. One of the things about Miles Square and many of its companion facilities that were established in the 1970s was that all the buildings were built at the same time, and so they aged at the same time. And that resulted in the need to establish a capital replacement program for the OC Park system to program and then fund reconstructing and replacing aging facilities, such as this tot lot. And then over in this other direction, the restroom facility, that's obviously a new one that replaced one of the ones that was built in the 70s. Occasionally we'll have some memorial statues and other kinds of historical memorabilia in the parks. This one, a tribute to President Ronald Reagan. Here we have a brand newly refurbished fixed archery facility. There used to be a roving archery facility in the park, but I have a hunch that that's gone now because it was a little too dangerous. You can see different ages of trees in the park. We saw some large venerable Italian stone pines earlier. Here we have some medium-sized Italian stone pines and Torrey pines, but you'll notice a lot of younger trees. The presence of the younger trees here at Miles Square Regional Park signifies an effort that's been underway throughout the entire Orange County Park system. For many decades, the Small Business Administration has had a grant program that channels money to local nursery growers to grow trees that we custom ordered as to size and species for deployment throughout the urban, the natural, the regional parks, and the beaches and the harbors and the historic sites to assure that we would have trees of all ages growing in all the facilities so that we would have new generations of trees following older generations of trees for deployment throughout the urban, the natural, and the wilderness parks. We're at our oldest historic facility, which Harbors, Beaches, and Parks acquired from the Civic Center Authority in 1966, and it is the old Orange County Courthouse, built of Arizona red sandstone. Construction was completed in 1901, and this is going to be where we interview a lot of our historic employees. And my great-grandfather carved the granite blocks that make up the foundation. His name was John Peter Jessen, and he died in the year the project was completed. have Ernie Schneider, who was the county's chief executive officer, but who worked for Harbors Beaches and Parks. And how long were you with the county, Ernie?
I was with the county for approximately 26 years, from 1971 to 1995.
And I remember that Ernie was the special district's administrator in Harbors Beaches and Parks, and he also was the director of the Environmental Management Agency, of which Harbors Beaches and Parks was at the time a part of. Ernie, have you got any milestone in particular that was accomplished in the Harbors Beaches and Parks system that comes to mind when you were on?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be the EMA director, which included Harbors Beaches and Parks during the 80s, when a significant amount of open space was acquired by Eric in particular. And I know I'm going to forget some of the parks, but the addition to Casper's Parks, Lisa Wood Canyon, Laguna Woods Wilderness Park, Limestone, Whiting, and I'm sure I'm leaving some out. But Harriet Weeder used to say she had a secret weapon, and it was her husband, Herb. But we had a secret weapon too, and his name was Eric. And when we brought Eric into the room with builders and developers, they would cringe at what was about to happen to them.
Oh, shucks.
Eric was responsible, in my opinion, for securing the majority of the open space that the county currently operates and controls. Not just open space, trails, bike paths, the whole system. I give credit to Eric for making that happen.
Thanks, Ernie. Now we have Larry Lehman, who is since recently retired from the county as the director of the Social Services Agency. Larry, how long were you with Harbors Beaches and Parks?
I was with Harbors Beaches and Parks about 10 years, from 1969 to 1978.
And you were the successor to our founding director, Ken Sampson, if I recall.
Correct. Ken retired in 1975, and the county was undergoing a reorganization mode. Harbors Beaches and Parks was going to be incorporated into a new super agency called the Environmental Management Agency, and I was appointed acting director upon Ken's retirement, and helped to bring Harbors Beaches and Parks into that agency.
And then Larry served as the first open space recreation program office manager, and actually, if I can say so, he's directly responsible for me having been brought into the administrative part of the organization.
That's correct. I remember, Eric, when you hired on I think it was a CETA program, doing trails work and surveying the Trabuco Canyon area. You were one of the first people to document what's really existed in the way of wildlife corridors and habitat in the lower Trabuco Canyon, next to O'Neill Park and below.
What would be an important milestone that you recall while you were with Harbors Beaches and Parks?
Well, there's so many, and I'm going to deviate a little bit in Site 2. First of all was the construction of Dana Point Harbor, which was just underway when I started. It was completed in the early 70s. That was a monumental undertaking, which I think today could not be done with all the environmental and regulatory controls. But perhaps the biggest thing was the launching of the regional park system. When I started, we had just the two parks, O'Neill and Irvine Park, and the third park, Featherly Park, was under construction and dedicated. And after that, the system expanded tremendously, and it was really exciting to see the foresight of the people before me and who planned the regional park system, see that actually materialize and blossom into the start of today's tremendous Orange County regional park system.
And it was under Larry's leadership that, for example, Craig and Carbon Canyon and Clark Regional Parks, Mile Square, the big important urban regional parks, as well as wilderness and natural parks and beaches.
Correct. In fact, one of the also the fond memories, one of the last memories I have with Ken Sampson was when Casper's Regional Park, then called Star Viejo Regional Park, was purchased, and we were able to open it up for public use. And Ken actually walked areas of the park, planting stakes where we would grade roads for campgrounds. It was a very simple process, but it worked, and the park opened in late 75, early 76.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Art. Take care.
Okay, now we have Kevin Thomas, who is our current director of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks here in 2005. Kevin, how long have you worked for Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
It's not quite 4 years.
4 years, okay. And Kevin was previously the Director of Community Services in San Bernardino County and came to us from the Wildlands Conservancy.
Correct, yes.
Right.
Short stint with NGO there.
And can you share with us a particular milestone that's you're fond of since you've been our leader?
Well, actually, I think one of them is current, which is I'm very proud of the fact that the exhibits that are on display right now, the Ansel Adams exhibit is a marvelous opportunity for us not only to get people into the facility, but to allow us to give back to the community. So I think that, along with the improvements that have been made here, our ability to, we've gotten some grants to do some improvements on the facility, which are hard to come by, but much needed in order to maintain that facility. That type of continued operation is something I think we can all be proud of.
And also, it's with Kevin's leadership and support that on his watch, for example, the Harding Canyon parcel has been acquired as an addition to the Majeska Canyon Nature Preserve, which is probably one of the prettiest pieces of real estate in the county, and also some additional acquisitions that have occurred in the Baker Canyon area and in the Fremont Canyon area.
Unfortunately, I've been both tutored and led in the right direction by current staff in those regards. But yes, we continue to be able to add properties, add opportunities for the public to enjoy Orange County in a lot of various ways. Again, through grant funding, much to the public's credit for having supported some of the Prop 12, Prop 40 grants that have provided those resources for those acquisitions. So that's been a great opportunity for us to improve the system.
And Kevin has also kicked off the redevelopment of Dana Point Harbor, and from a policy standpoint has provided the leadership in the Ranger Citation Authority program, which we will be embarking on hopefully in this year 2005.
Well, that's true. It's something we've been working on for a couple of years. Again, the net result is to improve our ability to provide services and then to protect those resources. And it's a process, sometimes longer than we'd like, but the net result is, and the outcome is, an improved system for everybody to enjoy.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. Okay, now we have Jeff Dickman, who's the Chief of Trails Implementation for the Harbors, Beaches, and Parks program. Jeff, how long have you been with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
Actually, about 15 years now.
15 years. Okay, and what would be one of your favorite milestones that's been accomplished under your leadership?
Well, I think the one milestone for me that's the most memorable is opening my first section of riding a hiking trail. And that happened in 1994, and it was the Live Oak Trail as part of Irvine Regional Park, or actually O'Neill Regional Park.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Now we have the Venerable Bob Wingard. Bob, how long were you with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
I originally started with the Harbors, Beaches, and Parks District back when it was the Harbor District, and that was in 1963, and I was with the county about 30 years.
And what positions, Bob, did you occupy in Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
I started out as an engineer with the district, we were doing the development of and planning for both Sunset Aquatic Marina, and then shortly followed that with Dana Point Harbor, which I enjoyed very much. Been very successful project.
And then you moved up into the program manager's position?
Right. I replaced Larry Lehman as program manager and held that position for a few years. And then I went, became the director of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks, as it was known at that time.
And actually, if it wasn't for Bob, I wouldn't be in the position that I've occupied, because he's the guy that gave me my big break in my career.
Never been so. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Okay, now we have Grace Dove, who I had the pleasure of hiring, what, in 1980, right, Grace?
It was April 2nd, 1981.
Right, and Grace was the successor to Joe Hyde, who was our earlier grants officer. He was a Los Alamitos City Councilman, and the only member of my staff that died while still working for me. And Grace took over, and how many years were you with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
Up until yesterday.
Until yesterday.
Until yesterday.
Which would have been the 12th of April 2005.
Right.
Okay.
When they created the Dana Point Harbor Department as a spinoff.
Okay. And you went to work for that department?
Well, we became that department,
okay.
yeah, as of yesterday.
Okay. And what would be one of your more significant milestones that was accomplished when you were our grants officer?
Grants officer? Just accumulating a lot of grants. I really prefer the acquisition side.
Right.
Of the
Okay, well, thanks, Grace.
Anytime.
Okay, now we have Tom Townsend, who's our current grants officer in 2005. And up until the time that Tom joined us, we had brought in about $75 million in grants during the 30 years that I was with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks. And since that time, Tom has really gone to work and brought in another $60 million in grants and loans, not the least of which was for redevelopment of Dana Point Harbor. Tom, how long have you been with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
Just 3 years.
3 years. He's brought in $60 million. The guy's worth his salt. And what would you consider to be one of your big milestones since you've been with us?
I would say the Dana Point Harbor. We've got a loan and a grant, which has just been approved, and we'll see how that all turns out, whether it benefits the county in the long run.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tom. Now we have Rich Adler. Rich, what position do you occupy with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
I'm Chief of Lease Management.
Okay, and how long have you been with the department?
Been here since 1992.
Okay, and but you actually, how long have you been with the county total?
Served the county since 1977 in planning before I came to Harbors, Beaches, and Parks.
Okay, and what would you share with us as being a major milestone that was accomplished under your leadership?
Well, I'd say a couple things. When I was brought in, our focus was to emphasize the commercial recreation in our facilities. And at the time, it was with the director of EMA, Mike Ruane, and Bob Fisher. And really, we put a major focus on creating more revenue-generating uses. Probably the two major accomplishments were the two new golf courses that we had built, Mile Square and Strawberry Farms. And probably equally as important was the fact that we commercialized the campground at Featherly Regional Park. Canyon RV Park is now generating about $100,000 a year in rent to the county, whereas when we were operating it, we were operating at a loss of about $450,000. So a couple major accomplishments.
Wow.
Good money for Harbors, Beaches, and Parks.
Well, thanks, Rich.
You're welcome, Eric.
we have Richard Sherry. Rick, how long were you with Harbor's Beaches and Parks?
That's a good question. I wasn't quite prepared to answer that, but I'd say almost 8 or 10 years.
And what
Time
did,
flies when you're having fun,
Yeah.
so I didn't keep track.
what did you do for us when you were working with us?
Well, I was working with you, with Grace and Gary Medeiros, doing inventory of all of our local and regional park facilities, helped Grace with grant preparations for acquiring parkland, worked on coastal access projects.
In fact, Rick was actually our chief record keeper of the accumulation of lands when we used to do it before the GIS system came on board. And he also coordinated the annual updates of the annual Harbors, Beaches, and Parks program report, which are major records that we've used in developing and producing this DVD, because the information that he set aside back then is what we're using today. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Well, it was very interesting, and I enjoyed working for you and all the people in parks, and it's experience that's just helped me to this day in my job.
Well, great. Thank you. All right, now we have Yosh Kawasaki. Yosh, how long did you work for us?
I worked in Harbors, Beaches, and Parks for approximately 2.5 years, late 80s into the early 90s.
And what did you do for us?
Well, I was the planner 3 at the time, and I worked with land acquisitions, program planning, and generally whatever you wanted me to do.
A jack of all trades.
Yes. You know, one of the things that really keeps in my mind of Harbors, Beaches, and Parks is the 20 years that I've worked here. I've worked in a lot of different departments, and I would say HBP was really provided the greatest amount of job satisfaction that I think I've ever had working at the county. And I actually have to thank you for that. You did make it quite a good environment.
Is there any particular milestone that was accomplished while you were with us that comes to mind?
Well, when I was working on the program report, I remember that it was the older style of typing everything in, and with your help, we actually went in and worked out and got it more computerized, and a lot of the graphics were also computerized, and I think that was my contribution to HBP.
Indeed it was, Yosh. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now we have Trudy Toshima. Trudy, how long were you with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
I think I was with there about 4 years.
And what did you do for us?
I reviewed site plans and track maps and did a study on open space. We put together a map that showed all the open space that we had in the county at the time.
And in reviewing the development proposals, it was Trudy's job to apply conditions to the developments, requiring them to dedicate trails, beach access ways, land dedications into the regional Harbors, Beaches, and Parks system. Is there some particular milestone that was accomplished while you were with us that comes to mind?
We did the Newport Coast Planned Community open space at the time, and we had the opportunity to go out with the Irvine company representatives and go out and see the area that we were going to be doing open space dedication on.
And that was one of the largest single spurts of acreage growth in the Harbors, Beaches, and Parks system, with 80% of the land on the 10,000 acre Newport coast being preserved as permanent open space. Thanks, Trudy. Okay, now we have Wayne Johnson, who's the successor to Gary Medeiros as our supervising planner 4 in charge of development processing. Wayne, how long have you been with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks?
I've been with Harbors, Beaches, and Parks 15 years. My first year, I was the acquisitions coordinator for the county for the first 6 months, and then I transitioned into development review processing for the county, and I've had many planners work for me over the years.
And what would you come to mind as a major milestone that's been accomplished with your efforts?
The major milestone that I had was through my development review processing and consistency of things of importance to HPP was the total build out of Aliso Viejo, which turned into a city, and its interface with Aliso Wood Canyon Wilderness Park, our interface with Soka University. That to me was one of my accomplishments. I feel really good about that and enjoyed working on it.
Well, you certainly played a critical role in helping bring land dedications forward through the development process, Wayne.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good day.
Okay, now we have my immediate boss, Bob Hamilton. Bob, how long have you been with Harbors Beaches and Parks?
Altogether about 28 years.
28 years. And what positions have you occupied while you were with us?
I started out as a special districts administrator. Then I was promoted to program manager, and I spent a year as interim director of Harbors Beaches and Parks in between Tim Miller and Kevin Thomas. And then I returned to my job as program manager, which I am today.
And what comes to mind as a major milestone that's been accomplished while you've been with the department?
Well, there have been many milestones accomplished in those 28 years, which actually started in 1973, with a couple of years off in EMA administration. But certainly most recently, and very significantly, was obtaining the Board of Supervisors' approval of Proposition 40 funding for the Harbors Beaches and Parks system, with virtually all of it dedicated to refurbishment of facilities that badly needed some refurbishment. So that was a great thing for Harbors Beaches and Parks.
And I also just wanted to add that Bob, for many years, has been, the way I put it, is the guardian of the various the funds in the various Harbors, Beaches, and Parks funds and in the Tidelands funds, very carefully and judiciously administering their expenditure and safeguarding them. He's also been the most incredible person that anybody could ever work for, because he's never been mad. I've worked for this guy for 20 years. He's never gotten mad at me. He's a very even-handed and very fair-minded person, an exquisite administrator.
Well, thank you, Eric. And I wanted to say in closing, and I thought about it as I drove over here, that I just wish that our and HPP's good friend Bob Fisher could be here today.
That's a very nice thought. He was our director also at one time, as well as the county planning director, but unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
The Tustin Lighter-than-Air Station was established in 1942, and after World War II, it was decommissioned in 1949. But then again, it was reactivated in support of the Korean War, and was the country's first air facility developed solely for helicopter operation. During the Vietnam War, the Tustin Lighter-than-Air Station served as a center for ongoing testing of radar installations, which were later shipped to Vietnam. By the early 1990s, the base remained a major center for Marine Corps helicopter aviation and radar operations on the Pacific coast. In 1991, under the authority of the Base Realignment and Closure Act of 1990, known as the BRAC, in which I participated, it was announced that the Tustin base would be closed. Closure actually took place in 1999. However, the North Hangar is still used as a storage and repair center for commercial blimps. Now, of the original 1,600 acres of the total base, 1,300 acres have been transferred to the control of the city of Tustin for the development of various public institutions and a combination of private, residential, and commercial land uses. The remaining 300 acres of the base ultimately will be conveyed to other federal agencies. Plans are in the works to convert 84.5 acres surrounding the North Hangar into an Orange County regional park. Orange County Parks is in the process of gathering input and conducting economic feasibility studies to determine the ultimate features and layout of the future regional park. Two great landmarks on the base obviously are the blimp hangars from World War II. They are identical in dimensions, 1,072 feet long, 292 feet wide, and a whopping 192 feet tall. That's almost 19-story high ceilings. They are listed on the National Register of Historic Places and also designated National Historic Civil Engineering Landmarks. The two hangars were designed and built in 1942 by Holmes and Narver Constructors of Engineers, for whom my uncle, George T.D. Ellison, was the chief financial officer. They are constructed of Oregon Douglas fir and are among the largest freestanding wooden structures in the world. Miles Square Regional Park was originally envisioned to be the central park in Orange County because of its central geographic location. But that concept is now complemented by the emergence of the Great Park on the former El Toro Marine Corps Air Station property in Irvine. Of the 5,400 acres within the original Marine Corps base, the majority of land has been conveyed to the city of Irvine for the development of a variety of public and private commercial and recreational land uses. In addition to the residential and commercial developments, a large urban regional park is in the process of being established, which contains expansive passive recreational uses and very intensive active recreational uses. In addition to which, there is a wildlife corridor envisioned that will link the backside of the San Joaquin Hills on the coast to the Lomas Ridge and the Cleveland National Forest inland. While modernizing the Orange County General Plan in 1979, we crafted a new policy designating all of the military bases as proposed regional park in the event that the Department of Defense ever slated them for closure. The new general plan was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 1980 and included this important policy, which was critical to the ability to complete the $40 million purchase of the Mile Square Center Triangle and laid the policy groundwork that ultimately gave birth to the Tustin Lighter Than Air Regional Park and the Great Park at the El Toro Marine Corps Air Station. Perhaps ultimately, one day, a regional park can also be established at the Los Alamitos Naval Air Station, where a golf course has already long been open to the public. Some preliminary dialogue to establish an urban regional park there was underway with the commanding officer at the time I retired in 2005.
This program is among the efforts recognized in the Lifetime Achievement Award from the President of the United States in 2015. Supplemental information on the history of the Orange County Park System is included in the California State University Fullerton Center for Oral and Public History, interview number 2061 of Eric Jessen by Joanna Brand, published in 2008.